The best way to practice your skills when learning how to code is by finding projects to work on. It's also the best way to demonstrate your skills. However, sometimes it's easier said than done and nothing comes to mind. This is why today I want to give you some tips on how to come up with projects to work on so that you never get stuck again. Projects are awesome because not only do they help us practice our problem-solving skills, but they also allow us to experience the creative process from start to finish. So in this video, we're going to talk more about the benefits of having projects to work on. I will share my tips on how to come up with your own ideas for projects. And finally, I will share some examples of programming projects that you can get your inspiration from. But first, I want to thank the sponsor. Thank you, Clean My Mac, for sponsoring this video. Clean My Mac lets you do helpful things on your Mac. It deals with storage, speed, and malware issues. It even turns junk into free space. Run it once and never part with it. Using Clean My Mac, you can speed up boot time by up to 4 times, increase app responsiveness by 2.5 times, and drastically increase your storage space. Learn more about Clean My Mac and try it for free using the link in my description. Alright, let's look at the benefits of finding programming projects. Number one is that learning becomes exciting because you're learning with a purpose, with an end goal in mind. You see your progress very clearly and you can get creative. You can explore and experiment with different features and different functions that you didn't think of before. Benefit number two is that it's easy to track your progress. You can see it very clearly how your understanding of programming concepts improves with every single project. Benefit number three is that it motivates you and helps you believe in yourself because you're building things that other people might find useful. Benefit number four is that projects help you become a better problem solver. The more problems you solve, the more approaches you explore and all that stuff, the better your problem-solving muscle becomes. It's all about practice and it's all about creating new neural pathways in your brain. And finally, benefit number five is that projects are a great way to communicate your skills to others, whether to your peers or mentor or a potential employer. You see, projects speak for themselves. They demonstrate your abilities, and that's why people create portfolios to showcase the projects that they've worked on. Now that we're on the same page about the benefits of finding projects to work on in order to practice and build your skills, let's look at some tips on how you can come up with them for yourself. Tip number one is research ideas online. Don't be afraid to Google things, especially when starting out. A lot of programmers joke about being professional Googlers because that's a huge part of learning how to code and finding solutions. And there's no shame in that. And the earlier you start doing that, the better. Search for ideas to reuse or for inspiration. They're definitely out there. It's crazy how many people get stuck looking for ideas while they're just a quick search away. Don't be that person. Use technology and the internet to your advantage. Tip number two, look for opportunities to solve problems. Technology is a tool and should be used to solve problems, whether directly or indirectly by simplifying things or automating them. Be on the lookout for those types of problems in your life and in the life of others. If you can't think of anything that you could solve in your own life on a daily basis, then definitely ask your friends or family about what they struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Go a step further and reach out to local businesses or any businesses, international businesses, or go on forums to see what people need solving. Once you start doing this, you will have so many problems to solve that you will have to put them in the queue. And of course, when I say problems to solve, I mean projects to solve those problems. Just to clarify, to be on the same page. Tip number three is read. You can get so many ideas by reading, and I mean reading books, news articles, etc., etc. And it can be from international news to even local news in a local newspaper. In fact, from a local newspaper, you might get problems that are more interesting as projects. And also potentially more attainable because they're, on a smaller scale, not necessarily an international kind of project thing where it's just too large to even fathom. Tip number four is write down your project ideas. Make sure that you capture them because they can disappear as easily as they've appeared in your head, and it will be so hard to recover them. It has happened to me so many times. An idea came into my head, I didn't write it down, and then I was trying to remember what it was, and it was just gone, poof. And having a list of ideas is very handy. It helps you when you have one of those mental blocks and you can't think of anything, you can just go into your list and find the next idea that looks good or interesting, or the next one on the list, or in the priority pyramid kind of thing. So yeah, whenever an idea comes to mind, write it down with whatever you have handy, whether it's a notebook or your laptop or your note-taking app on your phone or tablet or anything like that. You can also email it to yourself or text it to yourself. In fact, my husband and I, we text each other things that we need to remember. And it makes for some really funny random texts when we're not together because we're still trying to remember things by writing things out of context and receiving them out of context, but whatever, it works. Write them all down whenever they're coming to you. And then regularly go through all of those places where you normally write them down and collect them all into one list to have them all in one space so that when you are looking for ideas, here you go. There's your list and it's easy to access. Tip number 5 is understand your limits. And by limits, I mean your skills, for example. So if you're a beginner, don't start with a super complex project, start with simpler ones. Or your time. How much time do you have to dedicate to this project? And finally, your patience and your motivation. Make sure that you don't select a project that's super complex, that's going to drag on and on and on and on and on and on and on, and you'll just get super bored and demotivated. So know your limits. And finally, tip number 6 is don't underestimate your creativity. A lot of people think that the fields of maths, science, and technology aren't creative, but that's a ridiculous statement. How else would people in those fields would solve problems and come up with brilliant innovations? That's creativity. Approaching something from a different angle, connecting the dots, or just simply building something all takes creativity. Remind yourself of your creativity and notice it in action to reinforce that belief. That will also help you generate more ideas because believing that you're creative will help you be more creative. And now let's look at some examples of programming project ideas that you can use as foundation, inspiration, or just spin them in your direction. The first one is build your favorite website or application. If you're learning front-end, try to get the UI to look the same. Or if you're learning back-end, then pick a functionality and try to build it in isolation. Build an application or website from scratch for your pet, a local business, charity, etc. Copying something can be a great learning experience. You're basically trying to recreate what's already great. You're learning how to do that. But building and designing something from scratch requires a different set of skills. So try to build an application or a website and design them from scratch for your pet, for your favorite brand, for your favorite band, all those things. You don't actually have to have a purpose for this website or app. This is practice, and you don't have to tell them about your practice and your little project. However, brownie points if you do build something for a local charity or a local coffee shop and you actually deliver the results to them and solve their problems. That's some real life experience that you can put on your resume, on your portfolio as well. Build a calculator. That's one of my favorite projects, and there's so many types of calculators that you can build, from a general one that, adds up and does all of the basic functions to a more advanced one with, more advanced calculations, and of course to a tip calculator, to a tax calculator, anything that you can calculate essentially. You can build out the logic using back-end programming languages or JavaScript. And of course, if you're also doing front-end or you have knowledge of CSS and HTML, brownie points if you build out the UI of your calculator. You can also create a conversion program, not a calculator, but still a great project, converting Celsius into Fahrenheit, cups into grams, and vice versa. What are people in your life, or what are you converting on a regular basis? Build a converter for that. Automate things. From recurring emails to adding things to your calendar to any other if this, then that types of tasks, you can automate them. And if you want to go deeper, use an API to get information from different applications and different services and process that data to automate things further. And finally, games like a Sudoku generator. Find a game that you can recreate and build it. I'm using the example of a Sudoku because that's basically number generation following certain rules. And if number generation following certain rules or logic brings any other game to mind, then why don't you build it? And to make things harder and more complex, choose a game that requires some sort of animation, for example, Snake or Pac-Man. So there you have it, my tips on how to come up with projects to practice your programming skills and some examples of programming projects that you can use as inspiration. I hope that throughout this video you've been able to think of some projects that you could work on right now and that these tips will help you to never run out of ideas or to quickly come up with some ideas whenever you need them. If you have any other tips to share on how to come up with programming projects or any other ideas of examples of programming projects, please share them in the comments. And of course, like this video if you've enjoyed it, share with a friend who is currently learning or practicing their coding skills, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. We can also be friends on other social media. You can find me as Coding Blonde. Have a wonderful time today you're currently experiencing. Bye.